At the beginning of the story, we meet Mason, a soldier sitting in his room reflecting on his life. He explains that his life started simply much like everyone else's, but he always dreamed of achieving something extraordinary, something only a few could accomplish. Mason's journey initially led him to pursue a law degree. However, after just a year of study, he found himself drawn to the military, joining the special forces where he received advanced training. This decision secured him a prestigious position. During this time, Mason also got married to a woman named Jenny, and they welcomed a daughter, Casey, into their lives. Despite these joyful moments, Mason's life took a sharp turn when he was assigned a dangerous mission to capture a dictator named Venus. While en route with his team, their helicopter was ambushed, killing all his comrades. Mason was the sole survivor. Shaken by this tragedy, he decided to leave the special forces and return to a quieter life, resuming his work as a lawyer. With his limited legal training from then on, Mason's life became more ordinary, or so it seemed. In the present day, we see Mason taking his 8-year-old daughter Casey to school. On the way, Casey confides in him about a boy who has been bullying her for days. Mason advises her, "If he bothers you again, punch him in the neck, that'll make him faint." He drops her off at school and heads to his office, where he meets Sebastian, an old acquaintance who knows about Mason's special forces background. After catching up, Sebastian offers Mason a job and takes him to a security company, CDI, which specializes in providing high-profile protection. He explains the job Mason is to serve as the bodyguard for a journalist named Claire, who is set to interview Venus, the same dictator Mason had once tried to eliminate. When Mason sees a video of Venus, old memories and emotions resurface. He recalls the tragic mission that led to the death of his team, and initially refuses the job, blaming Venus for their deaths. However, after much persuasion from Sebastian, Mason reluctantly agrees. Later, Mason returns home, only to face his wife's frustration. Jenny confronts him about Casey punching a boy at school, which had led to numerous complaints from the school administration. The following morning, Mason informs Jenny about the new job, explaining that it pays well but will require him to be away for a few days. Jenny protests, fearing the dangers of the assignment and longing for a simple, peaceful life together. However, Mason insists on taking the job, and Jenny reluctantly agrees. Mason then departs to meet Claire. Together, they board a private jet bound for Palonia. They talk for a while, after which they land in Palonia, where we see Venus, who has come to personally welcome Claire. On the other side, Venus's men search Mason thoroughly and confiscate all his weapons. Then the three of them get into a car where Venus starts talking about Mason, revealing that he used to work in the special forces and now serves as a guard for CDI. Mason realizes that Venus has done thorough research about him. As they move forward, their car approaches a bridge. Suddenly, the car ahead of them explodes, and rebels surround them from all sides, launching a full-scale attack. The driver of their car is killed in the chaos, and Mason quickly takes control of the vehicle, expertly steering it while ramming into the attackers' cars one by one. However, some rebels remain alive. Mason steps out of the car with a gun and starts taking them down one by one. Believing he's eliminated all the threats, he retrieves a large firearm from the security car and turns to CLA, saying, "We need to leave this place immediately, it's too dangerous." But Venus interrupts and firmly says, "Where are you going? You can't leave, you have to stay and help me save my people." Mason retorts, "It's not my job to save your people, my responsibility is only to protect CLA." Ignoring Venus, Mason grabs CLA and starts moving through the forest to find a way out. After covering some distance, Claire becomes exhausted and insists on resting. At this point, they realize that Venus has followed them. While resting, they discuss who might have orchestrated the attack. Mason points out this attack was clearly aimed at Venus, and now we're caught in the crossfire. Mason pulls out a satellite phone and contacts Sebastian, explaining, "We've been attacked, and we're deep in a forest far from the city." Sebastian assures him, "Don't worry, I have your location. I'll send help as soon as possible. In the meantime, head east. The path ahead should be safe." After ending the call, Venus demands, "Let me use the phone. I need to make a call." Mason refuses, prompting Venus to say, "Do you even know who I am? I could have you charged as a spy." Hearing this, Mason points his gun at Venus and coldly replies, "And do you know what I can do? I could end this right here." And now CLA quickly steps between them, diffusing the tension, and persuades Mason to hand over the phone. Mason reluctantly complies. Venus then calls his nephew George. As soon as George hears Venus's voice, he is visibly shaken. We learn that George is the mastermind behind the attack, and Venus was aware of this all along. Venus deliberately made this call to let George and his allies know he's still alive. After finishing the call, Venus hands the phone back to Mason and confesses to Claire and Mason, "I've known for some time that my nephew was behind this attack. The rebels have manipulated him against me. That's why I made sure he knows I'm still standing." Venus insists they head back to the capital, but Mason disagrees, warning, "The capital is far too dangerous. Go wherever you want, but I'm going east." Mason then begins leading CLA away from Venus as they press forward. Through the dense forest, Mason notices a helicopter approaching. Initially relieved, he assumes Sebastian has sent help, but as the helicopter begins to land, something doesn't feel right. Immediately, two men armed with weapons step out of the helicopter, which then takes off again. Mason realizes that this helicopter is not sent for them, and they are about to be attacked. The men in the helicopter start firing bullets at them, forcing Mason and Claire to split up and dash in different directions. While still trying to stay close, they find themselves moving through a shallow river. As the helicopter hovers above them, suddenly the men launch a missile directly toward them, but Mason and CLA narrowly escape the explosion. Mason knows they have little time before the attackers regain their position. He halts at one spot, takes out his sniper rifle, and carefully sets his aim at the helicopter while Mason focuses on the target. CLA captures the entire scene on her camera. Mason fires a precise shot, hitting the pilot directly. As the pilot collapses, the helicopter spirals out of control and crashes nearby, dangerously close to where they are standing. After running some distance, Mason and CLA get separated unknowingly. Claire, now alone, feels a wave of fear as she realizes Mason isn't with her. She calls out his name, but there's no response. Meanwhile, the two armed men who had exited the helicopter earlier are tracking her down. One of the men spots CLA, forcing her to hide behind a tree. He begins moving toward her cautiously. Just as he's about to reach her, Mason appears out of nowhere, engages in a hand-to-hand fight with a man, and ultimately kills him. However, the second man arrives and points his gun at them. Before he can pull the trigger, Venus appears and shoots him from behind, saving both Mason and Scylla. Meanwhile, we see George arriving at the crash site of the helicopter along with his men. Soon after, another car arrives, and Colonel Jane steps out. Jane confronts George and says, "My client is extremely displeased. Your uncle is still alive, and you couldn't even handle such a small task. Venus should have been dead by now." To emphasize his point, Jane shoots one of George's men, warning him that another failure will not be tolerated. He then leaves, leaving George humiliated and seething. Back in the forest, Venus leads Mason and Claire to a hidden village, pointing to it. He says, "This is my home, and everyone here is loyal to me." Venus introduces Mason and Claire to the village elder, explaining that they will stay there temporarily because the area is secure. The scene transitions to a moment of calm as Mason, Claire, and Venus wash up and change into fresh clothes. Later, they gather in a serene spot where CLA prepares to conduct an interview with Venus, handing her phone to Mason. She asks him to record the interview. CLA begins her questioning by asking Venegas, "Why are so many people after your life?" Venegas explains Palonia is rich in minerals and rare metals that are essential for modern technologies like mobile phones, electric cars, and MRI machines. Multinational corporations want to buy these resources at dirt cheap prices, but I want Palonia to become the world's leading provider of these resources at fair prices so our people can prosper and Palonia can develop into a thriving nation. When I refused their offers, they decided to stop me from becoming president by any means, including killing me. Mason listens carefully to Venus's story, slowly realizing that Venus isn't the villain people claim him to be. Instead, he is fighting for his country. Future later that night, the village comes alive with celebration. The villagers throw a grand party, and everyone dances together, enjoying the moment of happiness. Despite the dangers lurking ahead after the celebrations, everyone retires to their respective places to sleep. Later, CLA approaches Mason in his room. She starts praising his physique, subtly trying to seduce him by showing off her tattoo and moving closer to him. Her intentions are clear. She wants to spark something intimate between them. Mason quickly understands her advances and calmly responds, "We shouldn't do this. I'm here to ensure your safety during these troubling times." Claire, sensing his refusal, smiles and bids him good night before returning to her own room. The next morning, Claire wakes up to find Mason already awake and ready. He tells her, "Get ready quickly. We need to leave soon." Before they can leave, Venus arrives. He looks at Mason and says, "I'm planning to go to Santiago for the future of my people, but I need your help. Stay here and protect my people." Mason firmly replies, "I was sent here by CDI to protect Claire, and I cannot jeopardize the life of someone from my own country for your cause." Venus nods, but counters, "You may be right, but one thing puzzles me. Why did CDI send only you? They could have sent someone else. Was this part of a bigger plan, or are you acting ignorant?" These words leave Mason deep in thought. He steps outside, takes out his phone, and calls Sebastian. Mason demands, "Tell me the truth. Was I sent here just to protect CLA, or is there another reason?" Sebastian hesitates, but eventually reveals, "There was another purpose for sending you. We had contracts from several countries to eliminate Vegas, and you were chosen because of your skills And history with him. Vegas is responsible for the death of your soldiers. Take your revenge. Hearing this, Mason feels conflicted. He takes out his gun and approaches Venus, intending to carry out the mission. However, as he gets closer, he hesitates. Instead of pulling the trigger, he lowers the gun, grabs his bag, and says to Seal, "Let's get out of here quickly." Just as they are preparing to leave, Colonel Jane and his men arrive at the village. Spotting them, Mason, CLA, and Venegas quickly hide Jane, and his men start slaughtering the villagers one by one. Seeing this, Venus decides to surrender himself, unwilling to let innocent lives be lost. Because of him, as Venus steps forward, Claire pleads with Mason, if they kill him, they'll come for the rest of the villagers. Next, you have to do something. Quickly formulates a plan. He grabs a horse and tells CLA to take another before Venus can surrender himself to Colonel Jane. Mason pulls him onto the horse and they flee the village. Jane's men give chase in their vehicles, firing at them as they race through the forest. Mason and Claire push their horses to run faster. However, in the chaos, Claire falls off her horse. Jane's men capture her and begin taking her away. Mason, seeing this, reins in his horse, but decides we need proper planning to save her. Acting rashly will only get us all killed. He turns to Venegas and says, "It's time for you to head to Santiago." The two of them take shelter in a nearby church for the night. While resting, Mason finally says to Venegas, "I understand everything now. I'll help you." Hearing this, Venegas asks, "Can I use your phone? I need to call an old friend, Edward Levidew. He can assist us." Mason hands him the phone. The next morning, Edward Levidew arrives at their location. Together, they devise a plan to lure Colonel Jane to a specific spot. Levidew contacts Jane, arranging a meeting under the guise of an agreement. Meanwhile, Mason heads to the meeting point ahead of time to prepare. When Jane arrives with his men, he brings CLA with him. Held hostage, Mason and Jane stand face to face, guns pointed at each other. One of Jane's men drags CLA forward and places a gun to her head. Jane sneers, "Hand over Venus, or I'll kill her." Mason, with no choice, signals Venus to step forward. Venus emerges, but he's not alone. Behind him are dozens of villagers, all armed and ready. Outnumbered, the villagers launch an attack on Jane's men, taking them down one by one. Amid the chaos, Mason seizes the opportunity to act. He frees Claire, and the three of them make a run for it. Venus leads Mason and Claire through a secret passageway, explaining, "This path will take us inside my palace." They eventually reach a room where they find George sitting nervously. George is startled to see Venegas, but freezes as Venegas speaks to him with a calm yet firm tone. Venegas begins, "You need to understand that Jane is using you. Once his goals are achieved, he won't think twice about getting rid of you." George looks conflicted, but eventually nods. He steps forward, and the two share a heartfelt hug. Suddenly, a general bursts into the room. Without a moment's hesitation, the general fires at Venegas. Mason immediately shields CLA, and Vegas swiftly pulls out his gun, shooting the general. In return, the commotion ends as the general collapses. Mason rushes to Venegas, fearing he's been hit. Venus smiles faintly and says, "My suit is bulletproof, so I'm fine." They turn to George only to see him lying wounded on the floor. One of the bullets meant for Venus had struck George. As George takes his final breaths in Venus's arms, he whispers, "I'm sorry, uncle," and dies. Overwhelmed with grief, Venus breaks down, mourning the loss of his nephew. Before they can recover, Poloni soldiers storm into the room, guns pointed at them. Venus stands in front of Mason and Claire, attempting to reason with the soldiers. "Listen to me," he pleads. "Colonel Jane is the real enemy here. If you don't stop him, he'll destroy not just us, but our entire country." As his words begin to resonate, Colonel Jane enters the room with his men, interrupting the moment. Jane orders his men to fire, but the Poloni soldiers, swayed by Venus's speech, turn their guns on Jane's men. Amid the chaos, Venus leads Mason and Claire to a secret room. Jane, however, notices their escape and follows with his men inside the secret room. The lights suddenly go out. Venus lights a small flame with his lighter and reveals another hidden door. He ushers Mason and Claire through it, and they begin running. Jane's men give chase, firing relentlessly. Mason stops and shouts, "You two go ahead, I'll handle this." Venus and CLA reluctantly continue running while Mason stays back to hold off their pursuers. Jane catches up to Mason, and the two engage in a brutal fight. During the struggle, Jane reveals with a sneer, "It was me who ordered the death of your companions." Just as the blade near Mason's throat, Claire appears and strikes Jane on the head from behind, knocking him unconscious. The two regroup with Venus, but outside, Jane's men are everywhere, firing from all directions. Mason, realizing the danger, grabs a gun and begins taking them down one by one with precision. Claire captivated by Mason's bravery, records the entire scene on her camera. Just when it seems they're outnumbered, the doors burst open. Sebastian enters with 101 soldiers. Sebastian and his men engage Jane's forces, turning the tide of the battle. After an intense fight, the remaining men are captured and order is restored. In the aftermath, Claire broadcasts all the footage she recorded to news channels worldwide. The truth about Colonel Jane and his atrocities spreads like wildfire. In the final scenes, Venus is declared the new president of Palonia. He thanks Mason and Claire for their help. Venus's words are full of hope and determination for the future of his country. Mason too is praised globally for his bravery, with even Jenny watching the news and smiling proudly. Later, Mason returns home to his family, reuniting with his wife and child. He feels a deep sense of fulfillment. A few days later, while spending time with his family, Mason receives a message from Venus. The message reads, "A small token of my gratitude for all you've done." Curious, Mason checks his bank account and is stunned to see a deposit of $5 million. Overwhelmed with joy, he turns to his wife and child, saying, "Let's spend the whole day together. Nothing else matters right now." The family shares a happy moment, and with that, Mason's story concludes.